There we go. Yeah, because I will. That's uh, so did the story this morning, and actually did the story with quite a bit more oomph than would have been doing it with us, which uh, you have that awkwardness if you're working with a camera because it's just you. But some keys there when you are doing something with a camera, you want to be sure to look into the camera. So I actually we had the main camera set up, and our church is actually using my equipment, but we're also looking at buying a second camera. I have a little, it's called an Osmo Action camera. It's the size of a GoPro, if you know what a GoPro is, but it doesn't have that fisheye view. It gives you just a regular view, but the beauty is it's got a screen on the front. And so if you're vlogging or recording yourself, which I end up doing a lot, I can see, it's not a great picture, it's small, but I can at least see that I'm in frame. And so this morning, what I did was I set it up to record and connected a small microphone to it. So I'm going to listen to that later. Now, I say all that because I was not looking into that camera. You have to make a choice as to where you're going to look, right? And so I knew that this camera was for the church and for the broadcast on Sunday. So I focused on it, recognizing that the second camera, if anything, would just be a second uh, a second shot. So you have to make some of those choices. And Sam, I've watched a couple of the videos you've done, and I'm not sure what kind of are you shooting with your phone or are you shooting with another camera?
The stories with the pictures are done with the Osmo Pocket.
Okay.
The stories I do live are done through a Canon 6D live streamed onto a Mac.
Yeah, because I can tell, like, I've started to set up an off computer camera to do this. And honestly, if I was going to do a story kind of out in the wild with a bunch of people that didn't know STS, I would probably go ahead and take the time to learn how to do that. I purchased an app for my phone because the reality is if you have an iPhone or an Android that's got a good camera on it, those are really good. Now, a computer camera is going to be limited. I like Sam. I could instantly tell when I look at your videos. I instantly know whether or not you're doing that with with your computer camera. Right? I mean, it's instant, and it's just obvious. So those are some of the things to take into consideration. Another thing is sound is more important than picture, especially to millennials. If you're doing any kind of ministry where you're having younger people, the they will they will forgive bad video, but they will switch off bad audio almost universally. So there are a number of ways. There's a couple of times that during what we've done that I've hooked up my microphone to my computer. That's usually on Mondays because normally by Wednesday the church has my computer and my gear, so I don't have my good stuff. But I do have a little Rode microphone. It's about $59.95 US, and you can buy them on Amazon. And it plugs into your iPhone. It'll also plug into your computer. There's two different types, so you'll want to read, the right kind. But it will vastly improve your audio, and it's small, so I can actually carry all my gear to video in a small bag, and still have a presentable video. Now, for me, I also shoot in 4K because, and most of your phones are going to have 4K. Most cameras now are going to have 4K. The problem with 4K, it takes an amazingly large amount of memory. It's just huge. So I have SDs all around here. I have memory boxes all around my house. I try not to let my wife know when I bought a new one. And actually today there is a sale on Amazon of a small SSD, the T5. It's 500 gigabytes. I think it's normally $140. It's on sale today for $80. But it's solid state and it's tiny. I mean, it's thin, and the download speeds on it are incredible. So it's a Samsung, I believe. And so if you're going, it is great for traveling. Just understand, if you have a solid state drive as opposed to a regular external hard drive, if something goes wrong with the solid state, you've lost it. It's gone. With an external hard drive, a lot of times you can rescue what's there. Now, for me, what I normally do is if I've got something that's important, I'll do dual backups, especially when I'm traveling, because I figure it's going to be easier to lose something when I'm traveling as it is when I'm home. So I actually have 3 of the Samsung. I've got the 2 terabyte and I just ordered today the 500 gig because that's just too good a price to pass up. And I use those all the time for videos because I don't want to store all my video on my computer. But now on iPads, with the iPad Pro, there's a program called LumaFusion, and LumaFusion is $29.95. It might even be $19.95 right now. It's an app, an iOS app for iPad, and you can do professional quality video editing with that. And now with the iPad Pro, you can also connect that solid state SD drive into your iPad, so you don't have to load all your movies to take up the memory on your iPad. So that's, I also usually do an independent audio if I'm out in the wild and I'm videoing, like today. When I did the story, I had a microphone that was connected to our sound system because that's the way they do all our videos. But I also have 2 separate recording devices. One is a Zoom H4n, and it's got dual microphones on it. It's like $250. But it is professional quality. You can actually connect a regular mic like you have at church into that. And so it's professional quality, but there's also a little Zoom H4 or H1, excuse me, that is totally battery powered. They're like $100, and I can just slip it in my pocket when I do a story. The only thing I have to remind myself if I'm doing that is, if I'm doing the story in a church, which is what I end up doing a lot, right? Or even in a group in my home, for our home group, we'll normally have 20 or 25 people in our home group. I have to make sure that I repeat what people say. Okay? So that way it gets recorded, because with those kind of recorders, if somebody's in the back of the room, you can almost guarantee it's going to be muffled and not super clear. So I usually try to either repeat the question or rephrase the question in my answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those are all just little things that on a regular basis, what is the program? I have if I can get my iPad to come up. I have, what is it? What's it called here? A thing called Flipboard, which is a news feed reader on my iPad. And so one of the things I've got on it is photographic equipment and those kind of things. So every morning when I get up, one of the things I do is I go through that because I'm just too cheap. I was raised in a Jewish home, and so I am not going to pay retail unless it's an absolute emergency. So I'm looking for deals, and there's a lot of times I will buy something I don't need right at the moment, like SD cards, but I know I will need that in the future. And so, and usually I will save 30, 40, sometimes even 50 or 60% by doing that. So anybody got any questions about gear kind of stuff when it comes to that? The little pocket Osmo, I have one of those as well. So, because I usually try to use 3 cameras when I'm traveling. I haven't had the time to start doing that edit-wise. I really thought I would get to do that during the COVID break, but been so cotton-picking busy, it just hadn't happened. But any equipment?
No, I just like their.
Yeah, Sam?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just like they're super simple, and I literally have it plugged into my iPad for a big monitor, and I downloaded it and put it straight up, doing absolutely no editing. 99% of the time.
Yeah, just so simple. I love,
Yeah.
And you can get some really good effects with it. If
you're not doing it yourself.
yeah, if you want to. These cameras are great for what we call B-roll, for the backup stuff. Like use the main camera for the talking head, and when I'm on trips, if I'm going to do a video for mission stuff, then I'll use those cameras as I'm walking around just to get pictures of the city, crowds, reactions at churches. I'll give it to. It's the kind of thing I can give to a kid. I can give to my grandson or my granddaughter and say, just walk around and get some crowd shots. And so just it works out nice. But again, remember, sound is king. So you need good audio.
Have you got the wee adapter to put sound directly into the Osmo Pocket?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually bought a case for my Osmo Action that has a place where I can put the microphone on the side.
Yeah.
And screw it down.
That's cool.
So, and even went so far as to buy a handheld, a really nice tripod that's for vlogging, because I do so much. I mean, I usually do a video at least every 2 days of some kind. They might not all get posted, but at some point I will use them all for something, maybe my funeral service. So make a really.
That would be great. Do your own funeral.
I am actually preaching my own funeral.
Excellent.
Doing John chapter 14 verses 1 through 6.
Excellent.
That's my funeral text, and I'll be doing it. So
yeah.
I don't trust anybody else to do it because they might tell the truth. So
more fun if they tell the truth. They never tell the truth.
No, not at.
Jamaicans apparently so.
Yeah. So, okay, well, I just wanted to cover some of that with you guys because I know for a lot of us, we do those things. And here's the deal. I've been talking about recording things with pastors for years. And it's really, really interesting that during the whole COVID thing where people are, being forced to go online. Now, the sad thing is some of these pastors are going, we're having twice as many people come to our services now. We can't wait till this is over. Our churches are going to be packed. And I just want to go, and shake my head. But the reality is most of these guys are recognizing that even after this is over, we still need to offer some video components, because there are people who they won't come to the church, but they will watch a video on YouTube or on Facebook. And so, our call is to reach as many people as we can. And, I was talking to somebody online this morning about the illustrations that we have done. And he works in Thailand, and he's going, man, I want to get some of these illustrations videoed in Thai. And I said, yeah. I said, let us watch the illustrations in Spanish first, or in English first, and see what's there and see how this works. And then we're going to start offering opportunities. We want to do some of the illustrations in Spanish, which, we already have several of, but we want to do it in a way that we can then not have any qualms about using online. And in Thai, in French, I've been shocked at how many people still speak French. Because if you go to Africa, I mean, it's, there's more people that speak French outside of France than there are in France. So who knew, right? So this is a tool that we as storytellers, it shouldn't become our focus, but we should appreciate it, value it, and honor it. And rather than just throwing things together, which sometimes, we're forced to do, right? I mean, that's the reality of ministry. But if we have opportunities, you all can be praying tomorrow. Some of the parks here are opening back up, but you have to have reservations, and you can only go in for like 2-hour periods. So there's a park down by the river. Our grandkids are staying with us for 2 days. So I'm going to get my video equipment in the morning. I'm taking it to the park, and I'm going to do the path illustration on a path that goes down to the river. So, there's some of those kind of things we can do to make things come even more alive. But we also want to be careful. My tendency is I get wrapped up in the technology, and, doing slow motion and adding things in to increase the, like, ooh, this is awesome. We have to be really careful with some of those things. It's not bad to have 1 or 2 of those things, but if every illustration comes across as that slick, well-produced deal, then you've got the guys in Africa or the guys in Guatemala or someplace else that are limited with equipment, that don't have the experience. Then they're not going to be willing just to pick up their phone and video themselves doing an illustration. So always keep in the forefront of your mind multiplication. That you want whatever you do to be easily multiplied in any culture. And so, everybody has cell phones. That has been one of the greatest surprises to me as I've traveled around the world. Is the most remote place on the planet, somebody's going to have a cell phone. Well, everybody's going to have a cell phone, not somebody. I mean, the overwhelming majority of the people. Gone into homes where they didn't have a floor, just dirt. But everybody in the family's got a cell phone. So that's the kind of thing we need to learn about, take advantage of, and recognize. Be praying for us. We're trying to develop some things for the phones, micro SD cards, some of that kind of stuff. So, some real possibilities out there. It's just when you're a small volunteer-run organization, everybody starts getting stretched a little thin. So. But, okay, any other questions about technological stuff? We'll go ahead and jump into the story for a little bit. All right. So
I have,
I'll just
I
go ahead.
have something I'd like to share just real
Oh,
quick.
yeah, Andrew, go ahead.
What Butch said about people just with a phone, an iPhone is actually quite good.
Yes.
Even if you don't have the stabilizer that other people have, or someone just has to hold it, just basically on something solid. The iPhone is very good. And I think or a regular phone for that matter, one of those cheapo Androids, like the latest one that came out. But I just want to encourage what Butch said is that we don't have to be perfect in everything we do.
Yeah.
Just do as best we can.
Yeah. Yeah. And just remember multiplication. That's what we're
Multiplication, that's right.
So here's the story. I'll just run through it kind of quickly so we can talk about some applications. So Peter turned around and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following him. This was the one who leaned against Jesus at the supper and asked, Lord, who is it that's going to betray you? When Peter saw him following, he said to Jesus, well, Lord, what about him? And Jesus said, what is it to you if I want him to remain until I come? As for you, you follow me. Now, this rumor spread to the brothers and sisters that this disciple would not die. Yet Jesus didn't say he would not die, but what is it to you if I want him to remain until I come? Now, this is the disciple who testifies of these things, who wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. And there are also many other things that Jesus did, which, if every one of them were written down, I suppose the world itself wouldn't be big enough to contain all the books. And so there we go. Now, I'll just kind of share with you guys where I went with my applications. One of the things I did, because I knew that this morning I was going to be doing this story with a camera, I knew I would be getting no feedback, right? So what I made sure to do was to do this story in front of a live audience, not just you guys, who you count as live audience, right? But last night, I made my grandkids sit down and we did this story. And children are great if you're doing a story like this that you're preparing to do in something that's, pretty serious, because they're not going to hold back and they're just going to blurt out. And honestly, what happens, children are the ultimate oral learners, because they haven't been taught yet how to think in those abstract terms the way adults have. And almost universally, what I find is the things that children blurt out are the things that almost every adult is thinking in the back of their mind. They just don't say it. All right? Because we're like, we've been educated beyond that, but we're like, oh, yeah, I don't know. And so I love doing stories with children that I know I'm going to be doing with adults. Because as I listen to the kids, my grandson last night was talking about, how Peter was trying to shift the focus off of him and onto John. And he said, yeah, I do that. A couple of weeks ago, they were supposed to come over to the house, and he wasn't allowed to come over because of something he had done. And he was telling me last night that when he got in trouble, he immediately started shifting to his sister, and this story reminded him of that. This story reminded him that that was his bent, to try to do that. And I went, wow, do you, has that been a problem in other things? He's, oh yeah. And then his sister started sharing a little bit. And so for me, what that said to me was, this is an issue with all of us, right? I mean, I do the same thing. And so this morning when I was telling the story, I was kind of like, wow, is that still a problem for people today that, if God starts working in our heart that we might want to shift the focus onto somebody else and somebody else's behavior and make excuses for what we have done by comparing it with somebody else. Does that still happen? What might that look like? And sometimes when I'm talking into a camera, I will give some really specific examples, but sometimes I just want to throw it out there and give people a chance to talk. Again, because of the camera limitations, digital cameras have a limit of about 29 minutes and 38 seconds to record a video because of tax purposes. If they were a video camera, it would put them in a different tax bracket in the most places, and it would increase the amount of taxes that governments would charge for them. So most Japanese camera makers have limited their cameras to 29 minutes and something. There's only 2 cameras that I'm aware of that do not have those limitations, and they came out after I'd already bought mine. So, I'm stuck with what I got. But that's kind of good too, because it forces me to, it forces me to consider my story and to make sure I'm limiting my time. Sam, I will have to look that up. I know it, but it's not in my old brain. It's not coming to the front. But I will try to look that up and have it by Friday and put it in the chat. So, I just kind of gave some examples there. Then one of the things I really wanted people to think about, one of the things in our discussion that stood out to me, where Jesus says, "As for you, you follow me," even though he just told him what the cost of following him was going to be. That to Jesus, the cost was worth, the price was worth it. And so that was one of the things I think I talked about. Again, it's been 6 hours ago, so I could have it totally wrong as to what I remembered. The other thing I talked a great deal about is rumors. I love it that, so this rumor spread to the brothers and sisters about this disciple. What might have happened to the disciples if there were some of them that lived past John's death? What might have happened to their faith if John died and Jesus hadn't returned?
Go down.
Yeah, it could have drastically affected their faith because they said this is something Jesus said, but it wasn't something he said, right? And so to me, that is really, really important. And one of the areas I see that most abused by believers is on the internet. Facebook, believers post. I know some guys that love Jesus with all their hearts, but if somebody posts something on the internet, man, bam, they're one of the first ones to repost it. So, I think Snopes has a highly liberal bent, but before I ever repost something, I check it, but also ask myself a question before I post something. I am highly opinionated politically. I was very active in politics in my younger years, knew a lot of senators and congressmen, got to go watch President Reagan speak and a lot of those things. So I guess that tells you which side of the aisle I was on. And
how old you are.
Yeah, and how old yes, most definitely. So I was actually the youngest delegate in the state of Kentucky's history to vote as a Republican representative to the state caucus, because they changed the law. I was only 17 years old when I voted in the state caucus because I was going to be 18 by the time of the election, which meant that I qualified to be and I was a delegate for Ronald Reagan. and actually in a year that he didn't win the nomination. He won it the next. But when I'm posting online, I don't typically post Republican and Democrat things, but because God's called me to minister to both Republicans and Democrats, right? Now, if it's a moral issue, like I have no problem posting something against abortion. I mean, absolutely. To me, that's not political, right? That's a moral issue. Politicians have tried to make it a political issue, but the killing of young children, I can make a pretty strong case for that biblically. And I have debates with I've got a number of friends online who are homosexual. And I have no problem talking to them about where I stand. I had a friend call me a month or so ago to talk about sex outside of marriage and, what my viewpoint was about that. I said, I don't really have one. I said, the Bible has one. Let me share what the Bible's viewpoint of that is. Because I didn't, my opinion about that doesn't matter in the least. But if the Bible specifically addresses an issue, then I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to do it in love. I'm going to try to make sure I don't call names, which is hard in this environment, right? But one of the spiritual applications I came out with in this story was that the rumors still do damage today, and that we have to use a lot of wisdom. Scoring a point and getting 15 likes on Facebook is not worth offending somebody to where they won't listen to you anymore. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to offend somebody, I want to offend them with the Word of God. I don't mind offending somebody with the Bible, right? I mean, that's part of our call as Christians, right? But I don't want to offend them with my opinion. See the difference?
Yeah, I'm curious. What did the children have to say about the rumor part? Did they have?
They didn't understand rumors nearly as much.
Huh.
Yeah,
because grade school is kind of a nasty little place. Are these
homeschooled?
Homeschooled?
Yeah.
If they went to public school, they'd know.
Yeah, they're homeschooled, and they go to a Classic Conversations group once a week, and so the friends they're with every week are like, well, the young boy that was with us for quite a while, they're having some internet problems at their house. He's part of their group. So that's just kind of the quality level. And so they're still at that age kind of where they deal with things just, hey, don't say those things about me. And that's going to change rapidly. But they're not quite there yet. So in this story, what are some spiritual applications that hit you? And it can be any section of the story. We're not going through section by section at this time, but what are just some things that?
I think for me that the Holy Spirit's going to speak to me where I am and the way that I can hear. The problem was this group misunderstood something that Jesus said to Peter, but I don't think Peter misunderstood at all.
Yeah.
What was said. And it just that I think that was the right way to help Peter get it quickly and move on. And that I can trust that God's going to do the same thing for me, that he's going to come to me in a way that fits who I am, the way he's made me. And it might seem easy or harsh or something else to somebody else if I tell them about it, but he's going to deal with me one-on-one because he loves me.
Yeah. Okay. Andrew?
The need to clarify misunderstandings, I think, is a really good application.
Yeah.
That they use what, almost 2 verses, a verse and a half, right? Verse and a half, almost 2 verses to clarify this misunderstanding. And that's when you consider that this is the only thing we have God speaking to us that most people believe. 2 verses, that's a considerable portion of the Bible to clarify misunderstandings, not just counting the Proverbs, but this is a real straightforward, clarify this misunderstanding and so when I get an email or something from somebody that I don't understand, I'm going to zip it back and say, please clarify that or help me understand that. Right now, there's a bit of a conflict with some people from my organization that I'm going to have to clarify next week. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and for me, one of the things that I teach all our people, never have a questionable discussion over text or email. If you've got something that has the potential to be misunderstood or to be dicey, have a phone call or meet that person where you can see face to face. Because the danger of text or emails is you lose the ability to watch and learn from ways other than just what's being said. It's easy to misinterpret the intent. For instance, if I'm doing something on my iPad, there have been times that I've sent messages and I haven't even paid attention. They were all caps. So, and my guys here at the church, they're all young and they're going, "Hey, why are you yelling at us?" And I'm like,
it's also easy. Yeah, it's also easy to for people to actually interpret it the way you said it. And I've received more than one email written in the heat of fervor that I thought, that's going to be so hard for you to take back now. And again, getting that feedback makes you go, maybe, whoa, I'm getting a reaction here.
Yeah, and I have a rule when I get those, I do not allow myself to respond for 24 hours.
Yeah, I don't even write out a response and then read it. I just sometimes 3 to 4 days, 5 days, just to be able to respond coldly. Yeah. Let me clarify what I said, because if there's a misunderstanding that can be fixed, okay, because we had a big family Zoom meeting and there were like 30 of us on the Zoom thing. And my dad, who's 86, put on a MAGA hat. And so my son-in-law put up his Bernie sign, and I put up I have an anarchy sign. I put up my anarchy sign. And so my one brother, who is also not walking with the Lord, but is married to another man, he really got upset and wrote something on Facebook. And I'm thinking, that's the only thing you took away from this whole 2-hour-long, 30, 40-person family discussion, is that my dad had a MAGA hat on some part of the time. But see, it's not worth talking to him about that, because it's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to dig the hole deeper and cause more rift. And so if something can be corrected or helped, try to do it. If it's not going to bear fruit, just let it fester and sit. And it's not worth looking at.
Yeah, exactly.
I think one thing that struck me is, John is marveling that, there's so many things that Jesus did. If we wrote them down, they would fill the whole world. And I think of how I have heard that, if you took away all the Bibles, you could reconstruct the whole text many, many times over by the books that have been written about the Bible. And so in a sense, the whole world is filled, with this book, this whole holy text, and with people thinking about it and meditating on it and applying it and telling the stories of how it impacted them. That happened anyway. We didn't need a longer text. for the whole world to be filled with the books.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, the University of Texas, the liberal university there, has on their main library, "You shall know the truth. The truth will set you free." I understand the KJV has the same text. And then I think in Washington, D.C., there's more scriptural references on almost every single monument. Lincoln's speech is like half scripture. And so it was pretty funny because there was a group that wanted to pray in front of the Supreme Court, but the guard there said, "You have to pray on the street because I'll have to arrest you if you don't." And it was like, man, just look around. just look around. There's half the Bible here already written out for us on these monuments. So yeah, I agree with what Diane says. That it's very interesting. And secular literature too. Quotes a lot of scripture, especially science fiction stuff.
All right. Any other applications that jumped out at anybody?
I think that the song, when we were looking at this, the song kept coming to me, "Turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace." And that, Peter is physically taking his eyes off of Jesus, but he's also kind of taking his eyes off, and we've got to keep saying, where are my eyes? Where am I looking? And particularly at this particular time, that's a really good thing to think about. Have you taken your eyes off of Jesus and, put them on COVID updates or really annoying political posts or things about masks? And when I put my eyes back on Jesus, that's going to maybe cause me to see those things very differently.
Yeah. Johnny, did you have something? Oh, he might have stepped away. Cheryl, anything jump out at you?
Well, basically the three that you gave were the big ones for me. Nope.
Okay, and that's, again, for me, those were kind of the obvious ones. And yeah, Sam?
Just thinking, as for you, follow me bit, knowing all that's coming Peter's way. It's knowing he knows what's coming our way, and he's still asking us to go do it. It's just pull up your whatever and go do it.
Yeah, I like that. Andrew?
I think another interesting application is what John also says. It says, "These things are written, that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God." And oftentimes, I went to a university, a theological university. I belong to a group, and they get into theological debates about the stupidest things. It is totally insane what they discuss as though that's important. And here John is really clearly saying, this is what's important. I wrote this not to prove Arminianism, Calvinism, once saved, always saved, you can lose your salvation. I wrote this so that you can believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And by believing, you can have life through his name or whatever it states. And so I think that, the message we speak has to be said is a simple message. It's as profound and deep as anything you can study. But the message of salvation is so simple, and sometimes we just get away from that with some of the stupidest debates I have ever started to read and then just hung up on.
It is crazy. It is crazy. Well, now, I did find one thing as I was studying out for my introduction, And I actually added a bunch of things to my introduction that didn't come up in my story. I planned for them to, but I kept looking at the clock and going, ooh, I got to move on. I got to move on. I hate it when that happens. But I found an indication that James and John very well may have been Jesus's cousins. That Salome, their mother, in both Mark and Matthew at the crucifixion, in one of them there's a list of 4 women, and one of the women is called Mary's sister. She's the only one that's not identified by name. In the other gospel, it says there were 4 women, and has the exact same women except for the 4th one, and it's Salome. And so, I'm not going to build a doctrine on that. I'm not going to say, thus saith the Lord. But I thought it was interesting. And when you think about how James and John came to Jesus the week before the crucifixion and asked for the places on his right and his left hand when he comes into the kingdom. And then another one of the Gospels says it was Salome that did that. So we can assume it was her doing it at their behest. That makes more sense, right? If she's Jesus's aunt, hey, come on, cuz, how about a special place for,
Yeah. I think in one of the resurrection stories, it also says Mary, the mother of James and John. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and John, went to the tomb. And so Mary may have had 2 names, Mary and Salome.
Yeah, could have been. Yeah, Diane.
So you've now recorded it. I know the story itself is short, but what's sort of the breakdown time-wise of introduction, searching for spiritual treasures, and application?
That's a great question.
And then do you change that if you have more time? Does that ratio change?
Ratio doesn't typically change for me. Now, in this particular story, my introduction was a lot longer. And if I was to do the story again in this same environment, I would probably shorten it. But again, I didn't really know where it was going to go in my head. I've done the story now a number of times over the last 2 or 3 weeks, but I didn't know where the Holy Spirit was going to have me go as I was in front of the camera. And so I had a list of things that I wanted to include, much longer than what I would do in a normal storytelling experience, right? Normally, I'm going to try to keep my introduction down to a minute, as close to a minute as I can get. I was probably 4 minutes on this, but it's a sermonic treatment, so I don't freak out about that. Telling the story, this was a short story. It was probably a minute. And then the lead through in this story is probably a couple of minutes. But overall, I would say I probably started getting into spiritual observations with about 20 minutes left of my time, maybe a little bit more than that. So I'm typically, if I'm in a storytelling environment where I'm getting feedback, I'm going to spend about 2/3 of my time in spiritual observation, and then about 1/3 of my time in spiritual application. I may have been a little bit more in spiritual observation in this. I'll have to time it out when I see the video. But I knew that the spiritual application was just going to be me talking to myself. But I normally want to save a little bit more time if I'm having a discussion so that people have the freedom to share. But that's kind of the breakdown of, and typically, for most stories, if you got 5 verses, it could take a minute to tell 5 verses. So if you got 10 verses, you're looking at 2 minutes. Your volunteer is usually going to be a little bit more than that. So typically you're going to, if you got 30 minutes for a story, the first 10 minutes are going to be telling, volunteer, lead through. Typically. So, and, you know, and again, this was a rarely artificial environment because I was talking to a camera, which is hard. It's probably the hardest kind of storytelling there is. But I'm curious to see the fruit. You know, curious to see what the Lord does.
Yeah, it's very frustrating because you're so used to turning your head, and when you turn your head, your eyes look so weird. When you look back at the camera, and so you just got to stare right at. I mean, you can lower your eyes a little.
Have a big glass eye staring at people in the camera. Yeah. See what that does for you. So,
sometimes you can lower your eyes a little, but I mean, you've got to be looking right there the whole time, and it's just it's interesting.
I had another question which I posted on your Facebook page just a little before this started.
Oh, okay.
And that is, you said that you kind of prep when you're going around doing stuff, when you're driving and that sort of thing. And so I'm just curious, what does that look like? Because I imagine there's parts that you're like, I just got to sit down and do this in a chunk. And then there's parts that you feel like you can do on the go, right? Mowing the lawn or driving around. And what does that look like for you? I'm just curious when you're doing the out and about pieces.
You ever been out in the country?
I grew up in the country.
Okay, so you seen a cow chewing its cud?
Yeah.
That's me, and when I'm working on a story, when I'm in my car, when I'm mowing, I mean, when I and especially with what we're doing, where typically I've been learning 3 new stories a week, which has been challenging. I will admit, I've never done that before, and I can confidently say I really haven't learned the stories. I learned them. But if you were to ask me the day after when I start learning the next story, I probably could not repeat the story from the day before. So
without a couple of minutes anyway, just looking at it, yeah.
But I just stop. You know, like for me, I drive to where our church meets, and we've got some things that I do there. I've done several of these broadcasts from there. When I walk through the door, I just stop. And then when I get back in my car, I just open the story back up in my head and kind of remember about where I was and what questions I was dealing with. And I kind of remind myself, all right, I was looking at result and impact in that first part of the story. So when I get back in here, I want to pick that back up. But at this point, there's very little sitting down. This morning, the Lord woke me up at about 6, which is, that's pretty typical. I go to bed at 11, so that's a good night's sleep. And so our grandkids were here. I wasn't going to I made coffee. I didn't turn on any lights. And I sat in the living room on the couch and did my story. My wife came home from work the other day. I was sitting on the back porch in a chair. I didn't have a Bible. I didn't have any paper. I didn't have my iPad or my iPhone. She probably thought I'd had a heart attack and died. I was just sitting there staring into space. I was working on my story. And I intentionally don't have a pen with me when I do that. Because you know what I'm going to do if I got a pen?
Write it in your Bible.
And then, so if I'm working on a story, what I want to remind myself, if I come up with an observation, it's just like, oh, wow, man, that was that was powerful. How did I get that? What was the question I used? Where am I at in the story that I used that question? And I will backtrack so that I remember what it was to lead me to that spiritual observation. And that forces me to use my mind as my tool. And now sometimes, hey, guess what happens? Sometimes I get in the heat of the moment, telling a story, and never comes out. That's where the Holy Spirit comes in. You know, I'm trusting the Holy Spirit that He's guiding this conversation. He's guiding my preparation, but He is also guiding my presentation. And so if there's something that doesn't come up, then I'm just going to make the assumption. I'm going to pray through it and, okay, Lord, did I miss the boat there? You know, I'm going to do a personal debrief when I'm done with the story. But I'm not going to beat myself up over that, because honestly, for me, so I had basically 20-something minutes of making spiritual observations with this story this morning. The most important part happened in the first 7 minutes, because I asked people to pause the video and try to tell as much as they could remember. Then I did a lead through. And then at the very end of the story, I said, now, this is in John chapter 21, verses 20 through 25. If you will take some time here in the next few minutes, open your Bible, read this out loud, close your Bible, and try to repeat what you can remember. You're going to have this in your heart pocket. If I do nothing more than get the story in somebody's heart pocket, Cheryl, I was at Cheryl's house one time, and she invited 8 pastors to come over for lunch. And I did a story, and honestly, and I'm pretty transparent. Okay, I mean, what you see is what you get. I don't have a whole lot to be proud of, other than my relationship with the Lord. But I'm normally a pretty good storyteller. That's something God's gifted me with, right? And I recognize that it comes from Him. It's not from me. There we go. I did a story at that luncheon, and it just didn't go well. I mean, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't bad. People weren't throwing fruit. We had discussion. They weren't just sitting there. But when I got to my little cabana there, and I was praying, I was like, Lord, was it sin in my life? Is there something that something in me that hindered what you wanted to accomplish? And so I got on Facebook right there. It's about 20 feet from where Cheryl's sitting. And I posted, I posted in my prayer group. I said, hey, I need you all to be praying, because I'm going to be talking to about 200 pastors tomorrow. That's actually where Andrew and I met. And I need this to go well. And it just didn't go really well. It was okay, right? It wasn't a train wreck.
I didn't get to translate. Somebody else translated for you.
Yeah, and there was one of the lady pastors that just ran. I mean, she took off and preached a really great sermon that was supposed to be an answer to one of my questions. And my translator looked at me and said, just nod and smile. I'm not going to bother translating, because there's no purpose in it. And so I got done, and I was heartbroken. I mean, I was just like, okay, this has got to be me. There's got to be something in me, Lord. I need you to show me. I need to get this out, whatever it is. And so I walked back to the table, and Angelina, who is there in Cuernavaca, I was despondent. And it probably looked like it. My head was down. It's just like, man, really, 2 in a row. And one of the female pastors who was at the luncheon at Cheryl's house had grabbed the microphone from the guy that was heading the meeting, and that kind of thing doesn't happen. Now, she's an older pastor and has some authority in that area, right? And she started talking about the story we did in Cheryl's dining room, and about how it had impacted her, how she had gone to bed thinking about that story and woken up thinking about that story. And she said, because their church has hosted a number of trainings and really bought into storytelling. And she said, I allowed our church to participate, but I've never gone to a training. I've never been part. I always thought this basically was for kids. But she said, now I know better. I'm going to the training. I'm going to recommend my people go to the training. You need to go to the training. It was like, whoa, well, where did that come from? Because the reality is my take on how I did either one of those stories really didn't change. It wasn't like all of a sudden, oh, wow, I must have done a really good job. No, it wasn't that. But the power's in the Word, right? And if I can get the Word of God in somebody's heart, I'm golden. That's what it's all about. Cheryl, that's one of the most important lessons I have ever learned in all of Simply the Story. And it happened right there 5 feet away from where you're sitting.
It was a big breakthrough
So,
because up to that point, the pastor was not with us.
yeah.
And the fact that she got up and testified in front of the whole Pastors Alliance was surprising. And I saw you go to the back and you didn't look too happy. And I said, listen to what's happening.
Yeah,
It
of course, she was doing it in Spanish, so it meant nothing to me, but
Tongues are assigned to unbelievers, Bruce.
so yeah, so I say all that, Diane and Sam, especially for you, that it's not our process that's important. Now, our process is valuable. I'm finishing a third book this week on storytelling, and I've enjoyed them, but it's been really difficult for me because I look at their methodology and it's just glossing over the surface. It's not going deep. Our process is by far, to what I've seen, the hardest to learn. It is. But I see nothing that compares in getting the results of the depth in the Word. It's the only truly expositional oral method that I've discovered so far. I'm not saying there's not one out there. I'm just saying I ain't found it yet. So, well, one of the books was Truth That Sticks by my friend Mark Snowden and Avery Willis. And some really great stuff in there. Another one I just started this morning, and with my grandbabies here, I haven't gotten to finish it. Biblical Storytelling Design. It's brand new. I don't know that I would. I think there's going to be a lot of crafting. And so, I appreciate those guys. I appreciate their heart. But for me, story crafting is I'm just not interested in that.
Yeah, that one book on leadership was good for the first half.
Yeah.
And it kind of fell apart completely.
There's a brand new book coming out in a couple of weeks by Tom Steffen. But so far it looks like it's like $30. So I'm like, yeah, I'll wait till it comes out in Kindle.
Which one? Because I'm working through Worldview based storying at the minute.
Yes. This is it's Tom Steffen and Bill Boraker. Bill's one of our guys. He's a professor in California. Let's see here.
I'd seen his name somewhere.
Yeah, it's not coming up.
Yeah,
I will try to find it and have it by. But I just saw this morning that it's available in print form.
Mm-hmm.
And I do try to read. I try to read a lot on orality because I do want to know what other people are doing. I'm highly opinionated. I think I probably got a lot of that from Dorothy. But I do want to be open to learn new things. And, and our ministry has a lot of peculiarities, honestly. The fact we don't do story crafting. We have a totally different view on worldview studies than most ministries do. We use the stories to find out somebody's worldview. Whereas most storytelling ministries spend a lot of time researching people's worldview and then trying to find stories that match it. And
Yeah.
so to us, the Bible is supra-cultural. It is over all cultures. What we've discovered worldwide is, I'll tell a story and it'll have an impact I never dreamed of it having, because the Holy Spirit's working in that story. And we lean into issues. This is something we've talked about before as a group. If there are issues that cause people to get emotional or, I disagree with that, rather than backing away from that, I'm going to lean into it, because those are the things that are going to have the most impact in people's lives. So, but those are some peculiarities that we have. And actually, we've taken some heat for that over the years. So,
I think for me, that was one of the things that was attractive, because I'm part of an international student outreach. And so there isn't one worldview present.
right.
There's people with a Hindu and Buddhist and Muslim background, as well as some from Christians from other parts of the world who are going to have a different worldview as well.
Yeah, and actually, Ravi Zacharias just released a new book that he was supposed to do with Nabil Quresh, and I've been listening to it. I'm almost done with it. An Eastern view of the West, or an Eastern view of the Bible, something like that. But if you look up Ravi, who is in the process of dying with cancer, so we need to be praying for him and his family. I really challenge myself, because I am a white, middle-class, Southern American, right? So you don't get much more tiny boxed than where I am. So I really search for those resources that challenge me to see things from a different perspective. So.
Yeah, my friend has been my Reader's Digest for a long time, and she's great, because her reading speed is way better than mine, and she's smarter than me, so that helps.
Yeah.
And she's reading Jackson Wu's book on Romans from Eastern Eyes.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah. Great book. Anything on worldviews, that kind of stuff. And there's a number of those that come up on Kindle specials, gospel ebooks, I think it is, that I've purchased for like $1.99 or $2.99. And those things are just, they're challenging, but they're great. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you. Thank you for your help in preparing this story. You guys were a huge benefit. This is one of the hardest stories I've ever done, because of just staring at a lens and doing it. But that's the beauty of the age in which we live, right? Taking advantage of all the opportunities. And so the fact we can learn some of these things together is just a huge blessing. So.
Two things. Cheryl, I love your room. Today you were gone for a little while, so I got to see, an unobstructed view, and it's quite lovely. And Butch, I had a question for you that I was just going to ask after they left.
Sure. Okay. Panasonic GH5, Sam, I believe, is one of those cameras.
Okay.
It's either the Panasonic or the Lumix.
Yeah.
I think both those companies might make a camera.
Yeah.
That
Panasonic one's popular, but
yeah,
yeah,
but they're
good at what they do. Yeah, really good.
They're just expensive. So.
Okay, what was that again? Panasonic GX.
GH1, I believe, is the GH5. There's several, but you just have to do a study on Amazon to see which one has the extended recording range.
I don't think I'm ready for it yet, but you never know.
Well, you're probably talking about $3,000.
Yeah. I don't think I'm ready.
That's
Brilliant.
the Osmo Pocket Action, the Osmo Action camera. They just dropped the price again this week. It's down to $229 right now, and it films in 4K.
That's
So,
worth.
That's worth it. Okay, thank you very much, Butch. So are you going to continue your Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, or what are your
yes,
plans?
yeah. On Friday, we'll go back and we'll go back to the Life of Joseph and start going through there again. So I appreciate you all allowing me this interruption to prepare for this morning.
Well, thank you. It's
Yeah.
been very interesting.
Excellent.
By the way, Diane, Cheryl designed the house she's in
Ah,
and had it
Yeah.
built.
The reason I have the camera facing this way is because the rest of the house is out of order most of the time. So that's why you're looking at the living room. But
yeah. Have you seen that there's the cartoon and it shows, you know, everything clean in the spot and then everything out of view of the camera is just chaos. So that
that's
cartoon's been
that's
going
his
around.
place. The kitchen
Yep.
table full of books, the kitchen full of things. I had the view toward the kitchen and it was not good.
I think all of us have some of that. So, yeah.
My kitchen is my office, so it's my living room, my kitchen table is my office, so it's loaded.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for your prayers. It looks like Andrew left already, huh?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think he had someplace he had to go. So
Yeah, pick up his
Just-
daughter or whatever. Did he mention to you about Cheryl driving down at the end of May?
he and I have talked about it. Yes, we've had some conversations.
Okay, because Cheryl just wrote to me and said that that was the plan, but they were praying if that was the best idea.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised.
Yeah.
So now I'm praying. In fact, I was dreaming about it last night because it's not that easy of a ride going through that border area with all the drug trafficking and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know, who would she come down with? A family? Or?
They've got a friend in Texas that's done ministry with them for years.
Oh, okay.
And who knows the area kind of thing.
Oh, okay, so it's somebody that knows Spanish, knows the culture a bit.
I'm pretty sure. Yes.
That would be good.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask him about that, but I'll have to give him a call. So Lord's blessings to each of you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, guys. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.